Welcome to this episode of It's Not You, but Sometimes It Is. And today's conversation with Themis Gomes is such a pleasure. She has an incredibly crazy, interesting background and a very engineer approach to things. And I feel like a lot of our conversation really centered around how do you engineer the people side of a business to be able to make sure you have good momentum and have good structures and processes to have happy, motivated people. And she's able to be really vulnerable about the hard lessons she's learned along the way as an engineer and an executive in a bunch of different countries and different settings and all kinds of environments. So really interesting and fun conversation. And I really appreciate her vulnerability and her generosity in sharing her hard lessons learned. Enjoy the episode. Welcome to this episode of It's Not You, but Sometimes It Is, the awesome podcast where I get to talk with badass people in C-suite roles about their journeys, the struggles they've faced, the real life, real world, complicated, crazy problems, and the wisdom that they've gained from all of their experiences in these crazy roles and situations we face. And I am absolutely thrilled to be able to have this conversation today with Themis Gomes. She is the CEO and board member of BeHaven Kids, really cool organization, which she'll tell us about, based in Nebraska. And Themis, you have one of the most interesting career journeys. So thank you so much for being here with us today.
Yeah, thank you for having me, Meg. It's a real honor to actually be able to talk a little bit about my story and potentially inspire other female leaders into their career aspirations and leadership paths. So I'm
Absolutely.
my honor to be here. So I'll just give you a brief introduction, like my elevator pitch. So
Awesome.
I am born in Brazil, raised during elementary school here in the US, and then did my undergrad and grad in Brazil. I'm actually a mechanical and aerospace engineer. Worked in the aerospace industry for about 6 years, maybe 6, 7 years. And one after I got married, I actually ended up in the UK. Ended up setting up my own company in the UK as well, providing technical services for minor modification on aircraft. And that business started to grow. My husband joined me. I was also in parallel working at Airbus at the time, as well as my husband. And we didn't really know about business. So ended up going to INSEAD, a business school with campuses in France and Singapore. And we went as a couple with a 1-year-old at the time. We were actually going to start in France, but decided to move to Singapore because we'd have a little bit more support over there. Absolutely love Singapore, but wanted to be closer to home and closer to family as we were starting our young family. So ended up finishing in France, our MBA, so we could get jobs more in Latin America. And post MBA, one of the hard things was actually finding a job in the same location as a couple that goes to business school. So my husband ended up in Chile working for an airline company because he wanted to stay in the airline industry. And I wanted more of a smaller business setting and went to work for a computer hardware manufacturing company in Brazil, South Brazil. Ended up getting pregnant with my second child, took maternity leave in Chile, fell in love with the place, decided to move there. But once I did, I kind of had to reinvent my professional career because of some of the local circumstances. In Chile, they have maternity leave for about 6 months, and then once you get back to the job, the company can't fire you until the child is 15 months old. So that makes hiring female extremely hard for companies because of the liability. So I ended up falling into entrepreneurship by accident again. Worked with a couple of startups that had raised some Series A and B capital. Ended up co-founding my own startup over there as well with the business school friend who was based in New York. Learned the very hard way how hard it is to raise capital in Latin America, especially in Chile, because it's an 18 million population country. So ended up working on a couple of other projects, including the integration of a PE-backed smart alarm company that they had acquired in Chile. And then I was headhunted because of the startup that I created and the inbound marketing that I did. I was headhunted to actually be CEO of a media and entertainment business in the US. So do business development and also raise capital for them here in the US. So moved with the family to New York City, living in Connecticut, working out of New York. Did that for a couple of years. It was actually very good. Came across some issues associated with cultural differences between a capital partner based in Latin America trying to raise capital for a startup in the US and how the executive team is incentivized in order to actually raise that capital. And I ended up stumbling into search funds back in 2015, 2016. Learned more about that because one of my professors from business school who taught realizing entrepreneurial potential at the time. Today, it's actually called entrepreneurship through acquisition. I learned that I could actually look for a business to buy and buy a business with through a search fund. And so moved to the Boston area to be co-located with my investors and started to look for a business to buy. Came across BeHaven Kids in 2019, made an offer in 2020, early 2020. They decided to go with another buyer. COVID came, the acquisition did not go through. We had always been in touch, and in March of 2022, I finally acquired BeHaven Kids here in Nebraska. I think one of the hardest, or one of the things that we were most worried about is would we be able to get acquainted with Nebraska? Was it going to be too difficult for us because we have lived in lots of places? What is Nebraska? I mean, everybody, having searched for a business, I was able to speak with more than 1,000 business owners throughout all of the U.S. And Nebraska definitely checked a lot of the boxes. But still, we didn't know, 2 million people in this state compared to where we were living in Boston at the time seemed a lot smaller. So it was probably one of the things that we were most concerned as a family, but finally decided to move, acquired the business, decided to move as a family to Nebraska, and we're absolutely loving it. So I've been operating the company for the past almost 4 years. It has definitely been an interesting chapter of my life. Just give a bit of a background on what BeHaven Kids does is we provide mental and behavioral health services for children, both diagnosed agnostic as well as diagnosed with autism. Today, this is a very hot topic in the US. So I'm happy to also talk about that.
It is a hot topic, and a topic everyone can identify with. We all have friends and loved ones who had various diagnoses and experiences with neurodiversity, and it's incredible work you guys are doing. And Tam, it's just that is one of the craziest career trajectories I've ever heard. Like, can we just pause and go, wow? Like, my observation on that is you made a series of quick, huge decisions just over and over and over. Nope, this isn't quite right. I want this. Boom, we're going to move here. Now I'm ambitious about this. We're going to do this. Constantly weighing family, husband, career trajectories, market limitations of the country you were in. I mean, just incredible dynamics that you're navigating. And it sounds like you and your husband have been able to be very decisive together, which is kind of a superpower. They say that especially in the CEO role, your business will only do as well as the pace at which you can make good decisions, right? Mm-hmm. And it sounds like you do not have trouble with that.
Oh, well, no, actually, I beg to differ. I have a lot of trouble to do that.
Tell us more, because
yeah.
it sounds like you've made these incredibly big, bold, courageous decisions. So what's the struggle in your head as you do that?
Yeah, so I think it's always, am I making the right decision is the biggest struggle. But what happens if I don't make this decision and decide to stick around, right? So I actually have a friend, kind of mentor as well, who's always impressed with my matrix. So typically, when you have you're at a crossroads and you have multiple paths, my engineer brain is, okay, so how do I make a matrix in terms of what's important and relevant to me? How do I actually give it some sort of grade? And then what's the total score? And then kind of weigh out the pros and cons. Easier said than done, for sure. But at the end of the day, it's also about like the priorities. So I was like very So at the same time that I got the CEO offer to move to the US, I also got a job offer to be digital marketing strategist for L'Oreal at the time in Chile, in Santiago, Chile. It took me a hard time to actually get that role. And I'm like, this is my dream job. I'm like, I'm getting, free hair salon styles and free
Yeah.
products. And I'm like, yeah, I'm sticking around here. But my husband actually kind of nudged me and said, market is very small here and limited. At the end of the day, it was somewhat of a dream of mine to have my kids to also speak English the way I speak English without an accent. So we kind of we took the plunge and we just went. It's like, okay, worst case is we go back to Brazil in 2 years and
Hmm.
we just find a normal job and life
Hmm.
is what it is. So what's the alternative at the end of the day? So that's kind of like what we do. If I'm in my deathbed, will I regret having done this or having not done this? So at the end of the day, that's also how we make decisions. But that's not to say, I mean, it does come with its consequences for sure.
Absolutely.
So yeah, we've always lived in many places. Every time you start making your community building, you flip. And so right now, I think that's definitely something that we've been feeling a little bit more like having been in Nebraska for the past 4 years. Now we're starting to make friends in the community, et cetera. It was just so much easier when the kids were in elementary school, and maybe we took that for granted. And now it's a little bit harder, or things have shifted, and we don't really know how to do that anymore. So it's also and I guess the relationships is what actually holds people back in terms of moving as well. Like I don't want to be away from my parents. I don't want to be away from my friends. And so outweighing those. But then again, my family's all spread out too. So yeah.
Right. Yeah. Well, I think you bring up a good point that sometimes people look at those of us who've been in C-suite roles and it's like, oh, they've just always been really successful and smart and sure of themselves and confident and resilient. That's not the case, right?
No,
And
no, not at all. It's
and the
hard.
perception, right, of people who are leading companies is that we have the answers, we're confident, and that's not the reality. And that's part of why I love the conversations on this podcast is like, let's have real talk about what's really going on in our minds as we navigate this craziness.
Yeah, being a woman, I think, is also harder, quite frankly, because there is the husband-wife dynamics. So who is going to give up what?
Hmm.
It is true in the US. Women do get paid less as well, so that's also a factor.
Hmm.
Um, and then the family planning. I mean, that's a major factor for us women
Yeah,
too. Yeah. And
absolutely.
I wish I could say you can have it all, but the fact is maybe you can, not at the same time though.
Right. Yeah. And like you said, then it's all about priorities and you
Right.
being clear about your priorities and then having the courage to go after it.
Mhm.
And sometimes we don't know what our priorities were until we make that choice and we feel the pain of what we've said no to and lost, right?
You'll always have the pain of what you're losing.
Always. Yeah. Yeah. So, I'm interested. I always love talking about the people side of the business, the human element, the culture, leadership, challenges. You have been in a lot of different settings from big corporations, very early startups, businesses that really have their flow. And people have really different experiences in those different types of environments. And certain people are drawn to different environments. Like, the type of person that wants to be in government or a big corporation with a lot of structure, very different than someone drawn to be, in an entrepreneurial setting where they've just done a round A of funding, right? So, what have been some of the hardest people problems that you faced with culture or leadership, friction, drama, lack of engagement, those types of things? Like, what has been one of the most challenging environments for you? You've been in all these different business
Right.
environments. So, what's been the most challenging for you and why? How?
Yeah, that's a great question. It's very hard to say which is the most challenging, I would say, because it's really relevant like to the phase of life that you're living. I get asked the question of, well, which place of all the places that you've lived did you enjoy the most? And I'm like, it's the one that I'm at currently. I would say today my most challenging people problem is actually today. How do we? And just to give a bit of a background to why this is a challenge for us, in the ABA, applied behavior analysis industry, which is the autism therapy services, there's a lot more demand than there is supply.
Mhm.
The prevalence of autism in kids is just increasing. There's a lot more awareness. The diagnosis is a lot better than it used to be.
Yeah.
So there's a lot more kids being diagnosed at a younger age. However, we only have anywhere between 33,000 to 50,000 right now. That number has changed, BCBAs. And if all these board certified behavior analysts, which are the clinicians that actually apply behavioral analysis therapy for kids on the spectrum, there isn't enough supply
Yeah.
for the demand. And so in Nebraska, the industry has definitely been growing a lot. So a lot of companies have actually come into the region, and there isn't enough staff. So a lot of these BCBAs have to come from out of, other states or even from abroad. When I acquired the business, we had about 160 total BCBAs in the state of Nebraska, and I think that number has definitely increased. So today the biggest challenge is how do I recruit, retain
Yeah.
good people?
Yeah.
And also how do I bridge the generational gap? Because the workforce today is accustomed to having everything that they want at the point of their fingertips. And so bridging that gap between you can't have everything that you want. This is a workplace and you got to show up to work, especially because it's a one-to-one. So if you don't show up to work, I can't service a client.
Mm-hmm.
That is very complex. And I think that has been the biggest challenge that I've had thus far in terms of people. Earlier this year, I did something that I never thought I would do. I actually implemented an attendance policy for our staff saying, hey, you got to show up on time. And if you don't show up on time in the first 30 days of work or you don't come, it could be an automatic termination. We would not even fathom that 10, 20 years ago.
Right.
And kind of, and so there has been a lot of teaching this young generation, like what does it mean to actually come to work and
Mhm.
and responsibility and all that. So I would say that has been one of the biggest challenges is actually uh, showing up, coming. And they're not motivated only by money at this point. They're motivated by their work environment. What's what are the values of the company? And I think that's excellent. I mean, that's definitely something that we've honed in over the past 2 years in
Mhm.
order to retain. When I acquired the company, we had about 175% of churn. Right now, we're very low. We're around 75%-ish. So which is very low compared to the industry, but it's about honing in like the values, recruiting to the values, streamlining recruiting. It's coming to peace that it is a revolving door,
Mhm.
and coming to peace that people do not have the right training. So we have to provide the training
Yep.
in-house, and we are able to actually cater the training to the needs. So I
Mhm.
think that is currently the biggest challenge.
Mhm.
Uh, at some point when I was looking for a business to buy, I'd probably say I did have some cultural barriers, having never really been an adult in the US and coming across like these cultural barriers. There were a couple of challenges as well in terms of, okay, well, am I looking at this right? How am I looking at this business or this industry or this region
Mhm.
right? Should I, in the US, it's very much fast paced. In Latin America, it's very much relationship based.
Mhm.
And so you gotta make the relationship in order to make things happen. Whereas here, it's much more transactional sometimes, and it's okay to be transactional. So I think that was also somewhat of a challenge that I faced, and feeling comfortable doing something uncomfortable for me, which is just being purely transactional.
Yeah. Yeah. It's okay. There was so much in what you just said, but I
Oh,
just want to say, it's funny hearing an aerospace engineer say she was really uncomfortable with the transactional and really loved the relational. But it makes a lot of sense. It is a cultural thing. It's expectations,
Mhm.
right? That these shared beliefs of the people around you. And a lot of the engineers I work with are like, oh, it's transactional. Great. I want it to be cut and dry,
Black and white. Yeah.
black and white, and totally rational and numbers driven. And it's refreshing to hear an engineer say, I'm much more comfortable with a relational approach, right?
Right.
And
Yeah.
I think that there are some gender differences there that I've
Right.
definitely seen in people in all levels of leadership, where there's a little bit more attunement to social awareness and building and sustaining trust with women, with female leaders.
Right.
So that may play in there as well. So, Tamis, you were talking about the talent attraction and retention. It's not just your industry and BCBAs. It's, healthcare. Pretty much every industry I've worked with has a couple positions that they are just dying to fill, skilled trades
Yeah.
especially, right?
Mhm.
Um, and AI is changing a lot of things, and a lot in the labor market, and companies are really struggling to adjust and having to get really innovative about how they're attracting and retaining people. And to me, it's all psychology. Like there is science behind people and what motivates them. And like you talk about, people want a certain work environment. It's not just about the pay.
Mhm.
And we want to make our company more sticky for people. So they get in there and they're like, ooh, it's hard to leave here, right? This place is special. It sounds like you've been able to really cultivate a lot of that with the values
Yeah.
and yeah.
I would say it's taken us a while. It's also taken me, it's when I'm the problem, and I was probably the problem at one point because in my mind, even I am still an engineer, right? So I joke that during my engineering season, when I did work effectively as an engineer, everything was black and white. But then after business school, and especially in the media and entertainment, well, after business school, it became gray, the gray area. And then when I was working at the media and entertainment, everything became colorful, right? It is. I think I was probably when I bought BeHaven Kids. You do you make your investment thesis. It's all about the number. I'm not really involved with the people as much as I was involved with the sellers at one point during that whole process. And so I don't know the people, but I know the numbers, and I know what numbers need to be hit in order to reach certain goals for the acquisition and all that. And so one of the things that I had a very hard time incorporating into myself is the actual importance of value and culture.
Absolutely.
And it was so cool to just see like a flower blossoms when you actually incorporate it from a level that you're hiring and you're using it on your day to day,
Mhm.
and you're rewarding folks for embedding those cultures and those values into your workplace, how that changes so much your culture and how much faster it went than I had initially expected. And then it did make me think about, well, why didn't I do this sooner? And
Yeah.
it's definitely it's been super cool to be able to implement that, and definitely something I never done before. And we started to do that about 2 years ago. And now we're seeing the benefits out of that, and changing culture. I mean, it becomes kind of like a flywheel. So we did implement the EOS system as well, and
Okay.
that was extremely helpful as well
Yeah.
for us. But you do see the flywheel. It's kind of magical, actually. It's
Yes,
pretty
it
neat.
is. And I've always found too, in working with my clients, when you're doing these cultural changes, there's a ripple effect that a lot of people don't anticipate. They see employee complaints as complaints and negative, and I'm like, no, they're expressing a need. Leverage that. They're telling you what they want. Shift. That's how you keep people, right? So as soon as we kind of change our mindset and just approach things from a more positive place. Like, I believe these people. I believe they're going to tell me what they need to be successful. I need to listen and I need to align my business. It's going to take some time and energy. But when you do, and you start seeing the effort and the energy follow, it is a flywheel effect, right? It's like it gets easier and easier. And just giving them a little sometimes gives you so much in return you would never have anticipated. I've seen
Yeah.
it over and over. Yeah.
Yeah, it's super cool. I think one of the benefits, I mean, there's a lot of downsides to operating a healthcare business, but one of the benefits of actually operating a healthcare business is that you do have to have compliance. We do serve Medicaid, and therefore, we have to have like a bunch of compliance regulations that we need to follow and make sure that we're doing, and all that. So any complaint that we have from an employee, it does have a different weight compared to a company that does not have to follow like these rules. The reason for that is, okay, so what are we doing? Are we breaking the laws? What does this complaint mean? Does it mean that they're seeing something and we need to investigate it? So every complaint that comes forward, we do we do look at it. Just it's part of operating the healthcare world. So I think that definitely contributed to helping, and me particularly, and making me more prone to also looking at the values and implementing them.
Yeah. Yeah. Awesome. So you have had to cultivate a lot of leaders on your team to lead people as you've been in
Yep.
all these different settings. And, we learn a lot by watching how different leadership approaches, philosophies, skills, or lack thereof, how that affects teams and their performance and their engagement. And sometimes I know I learned how I wanted to lead by watching what I saw that didn't work. So what have you learned about how to be a leader, how to coach other leaders, sometimes from what you saw wasn't working or what you didn't like?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I think it's game changing when you apply the right person, right seat mentality. Definitely also came from EOS. It is so freaking true. The lack of supply and excess demand makes you sometimes just hire the first person that you can get your hands on.
Ouch.
And we've seen that, especially in this industry, because it's so hard to, find somebody. But it just does not work, and it's a big cost, hiring somebody that will not work, especially in the wrong seat.
Mhm.
So been through that quite some time, like quite a lot, actually, more than I wanted to, especially at BeHaven Kids. And it is so important. And then how do you determine right person, right seat, right? So going through EOS, I think that also helps to understand, okay, what is the role that we're effectively trying to fulfill here in terms of what the accountability is within the company. So sitting down and having like these strategy sessions in which you outline, these are the roles, these are the functions. So how do we as a small company actually organize ourselves to make sure that these functions are getting completed? And then, okay, then you figure out what the skill set is, and then find the people. And then in terms of the people is, can they do it? Get it? Can they do it? They want to do it? And do they get it? Because sometimes you do have people that want the job. Um, you think they can, but they don't really get it. They have the credentials and et cetera, but they don't really get what the job is. And any of that kind of combination is not good. But obviously, there is always the coaching um, aspect of it, but then it becomes do they want it, right? Because the
Yeah.
coaching
Yeah.
means somebody has to be open to feedback. And if they don't want it, or not open to feedback, then it becomes very hard to operate it. So that's been also a game changer once we started to operate that. And what's really interesting about what we did for EOS is it's one thing when I'm saying it, but when you have like a coach actually implementing these things to the whole leadership team,
Mhm.
and now, it's not just me, but actually somebody else, and there's like a systematic way and frame way, everybody just becomes part of the problem solving. Um, And those that don't want to become part of the problem solving just immediately self-exclude.
Mhm.
And that's also been super cool to see and watch. And it's been very cool to see and implement this process, because then it does trickle down to your, our technician and even our cleaning person.
Mhm.
Instead of just complaining, give us solutions. What do you recommend are the solutions? So that's been like a ginormous cultural shift that we've been able to implement at BeHaven Kids, from when I acquired the company to now. And now we incentivize our staff members to actually help us solve problem and not rely on leadership to be solving the problem at all times, because at the end of the day, leadership isn't really doing the work that they're doing, or leadership's focused on other problems, and you're living that problem. So what do you recommend we do or implement to actually solve that problem? And then what accountability are you taking to solve that problem? So that's been like a game changer.
Mhm.
And it helps like create this coaching culture throughout the whole organization.
Absolutely. And you just described that in a very engineer way, Tamas. So you need a good skeleton in the body. You need a good foundation, a good structure, things, and that is absolutely true. You have to get the right people and set them up for success, right?
Correct. Yep.
But then we also know that it's very difficult for leaders to relinquish control and truly facilitate problem solving rather than just jumping in and fixing it themselves. It takes
Yeah.
a lot of emotional intelligence. It also takes a lot of emotional intelligence for leaders to really give feedback that is meaningful and bring out the best in people. And you've designed it that way, but your leaders have to have that EQ, right? So, what have you seen as far as some problems that have come up with low emotional intelligence in leadership? What does that look like, and what do you do about that, or and how have you
Yeah.
personally improved your own emotional intelligence as a leader?
Yeah, that's a great question. And very hard to solve, like to have like a generic answer, because it really depends on the person, right?
Mhm.
I would say that I'm very lucky that I used to play water polo. So I was a swimmer and then I played water polo. And one of the things about water polo is the judge can't really see what's happening underneath the water. And it really doesn't really matter what's happening underneath the water, quite frankly, sometimes. So the judge will just let things happen, and then if anything gets super out of hands, then they'll interfere. And I think that it's the same. The same applies, right? Sometimes you do have to delegate to that extent. There will be mistakes, and then you support the mistakes the best you can. And that's how people will grow and feel more comfortable and feel more confident, and continue to expand, and how they're operating as a leader. The fact is, leadership is not something that you are born with, I don't think. I think some people are prone to it, but it's still an art.
Absolutely.
Uh, Emotional intelligence is definitely a big component to it, but there are a lot of things that one has to experience as well. I mean, they have some people are not cut out to be leaders at all, and I don't even think they want to be leaders. But some of those that are, sometimes they do need that kind of, what's the word I want to use? Independence to also experiment.
Hmm.
And it's so cool to see like how people just flourish with that. And so I think that once you give them that independence and they start to prove themselves and they become more motivated with it, um, and you're coaching them and you got their back. I think the main thing is, you can get my back, tell me what the problem is, let's problem solve together, and then let's apply it. It works beautifully. And some people just don't. Like, some people say they want to be in the leadership role, but when when the tire hits the ground, they realize actually they don't, because it does come with the bonus, but it comes with the onus as well.
Oh, I like that. Comes with a bonus, but also the onus. Like,
Yeah.
you got to step up and own the results, own your choices, and own the results of your team, which is incredibly stressful, being responsible for the results of other people. And that stress is usually what leads managers and leaders to do stupid stuff that's really dysfunctional, that's controlling and disengages people and causes a lot of conflict, right? And
Yeah.
I love your water polo metaphor. Can I steal that from you?
Yeah, definitely.
It's
I think
like,
it's like in
yeah,
the top three most violent sports
it
because
is.
everything
But
happens underneath the water.
you have to let things get messy,
Right.
right? And and you have to kind of let people struggle. And I think a lot of the mistakes I've made in leadership is because of my discomfort with watching other people struggle. I want to just swoop in and rescue and be like, "Oh, here, this is an easier way to do it that's worked for me." No, Meg, just you got to let them struggle, make little mistakes. And if anything, I just want to put up guardrails so that the mistakes they make are good learning mistakes, but it doesn't send us over the cliff, you know?
Yeah. 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 I mean, I'll just steal from EOS again and, delegate, elevate.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And if you're trying to manage and micromanage everything,
You can
you're
be
gonna
super
collapse.
stressed. Yeah,
Yeah.
I love Sarah Blakely as well from Spanx. She's like the if you get to a B or an 80%, like if somebody's doing a B or an 80%, that's great.
Yeah. Like be happy. They'll continue to grow,
Right.
continue to cultivate their growth, but be happy that they got there.
Yeah, exactly.
Learning and skill development is a lot harder than we like to think it is.
Yeah, but I think I think we do have that as natural for us female leaders because that's what we tend to do with our children, quite
Mhm.
frankly. I say that the best teachers like negotiating and kind of making the mistakes are my kids for
Mhm.
sure.
Yeah.
Uh, so there is that we already naturally kind of do when we enter into like the parenting and the motherhood. So we
Yeah.
should definitely tap into that as
Yeah.
female leaders.
I'm not going to dive in and try and solve my 10-year-old's problems for him. I'm going to support him and be a sounding board and then tell him, you go fix this, right?
Exactly.
And let him fall on his face every once in a while. That's
Yeah,
what we have to do as leaders.
correct. Yeah. And for ourselves and our own well-being as well, because if you dive in to solve for their problems,
Mhm.
what happens when they leave you?
Exactly.
What
They end
problems are you
up
going to solve?
they end up being the type of employee that doesn't take responsibility for themselves and can't
There's
show up
that
for
too.
work on time, right?
There's that too. Yeah.
I want my kid to be the one that can show up for work on time.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So that those parents that didn't do their job, we're not doing it for them as their managers in their first job. It's
Yeah,
like we're really helping them grow up, and it's
exactly.
a lot of work.
Yep.
And I want to do that for people. I want to support people's growth and success, but we're putting a lot of onus on businesses right now, to help develop that personal responsibility. And this generation is a little different, right?
Mm-hmm.
They have
Yep.
high expectations and demands for what they want out of work, and just lower self-discipline and self-management that we have to help build for them.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I think the down and the positive and the negative here is also that the economy has also been booming from an employment perspective. So there is also that enablement of that behavior as a result of the need of workers.
Yeah, yeah. So I know we're running out of time, but I'm curious because you've really evolved and been intentional about the culture there and positioned things so that leaders are really coaching, giving feedback, and setting people up to solve their own problems. So, what do you see as within your leadership team there? You've had a lot of growth with this company since you took the helm. What do you see as kind of the next skills that are going to be needed for your leadership team, or where do you want to take them? What is this next level of growth and evolution for them to make sure your company's ready for the next 5 years down the road?
Yeah, that's a great question. And honestly, I don't know is the my answer. The reason for that is because the industry is evolving so much. We're in a we're in a completely change process right now from an industry perspective, not only from a BeHaven Kids perspective, but from an industry perspective.
Mhm.
So we're all kind of sitting at the edge of our seat. I would say
Mhm.
that this industry isn't for the faint of heart.
Yeah.
So it's very challenging in
Mhm.
a bunch of aspects. I hands down the hardest industry that I've ever worked in.
Mhm.
And I think that a lot of the people that choose to be in this industry come from a place of passion,
Yeah.
because they do have the mission of helping people,
Mhm.
and that's like what guides them. So I think that I think that grit for sure, adaptability for sure, right, is what we need right now.
Mhm.
And maybe after we go through that and come through these challenges, and we'll the people will grow, and then we'll be able to say, okay, well, what now? But
Mhm.
at this point, I think we need people that have the passion, still have the grit, are adaptable. I would probably say those are our main qualities. Obviously,
Yeah.
compassion, but then I'll just be stating our values.
Makes a lot of sense. I mean, there's values and there's skill, and that grit, that more than grit, it's self-management, right? And the ability to keep a good head on your shoulders and be judicious no matter what comes at you. And you are going to have a lot coming at you.
Yep.
So that
Yep.
makes a lot of sense. And that's a skill. It's not a personality trait. It's not a value. It's a skill.
Right. Yep.
Yeah. So my last question for you, if I could give you a time machine and send you back to talk to you 10 or 15 years ago, what advice would you give yourself?
Don't be so anxious.
Oh,
Yeah, things work out, right? So I think we're
yeah.
always, or at least I'm always worried, okay, but what's going to happen? Um, this is my engineer brain. I like to plan for scenarios,
Hmm.
if this, then that. And I think that I do that. And sometimes because I plan the scenarios out, I know what some of the consequences are going to be or some of the results. I start suffering of anxiety before it comes. So I would definitely say you can't predict the future. Nobody can.
Hmm.
And life is a box of chocolate. You never know what you're gonna get.
I love it. I love it. I think a lot of us have a barely hidden undercurrent of angst. And I think that's very prevalent, at least in the United States today, with people in responsible jobs and leadership roles, is we're nervous, we're in survival mode, we're angsty. And
Yeah,
if we could all just take a breath and remember, generally things have worked out for me,
yeah, yeah.
right?
It's hard, but yes, it's a lot about the stoic.
Hmm.
You got to live in the present, and
Hmm.
it's interesting. I have a colleague that I've been talking to. He bought a business a couple of years before I did, so he's a little bit more down the road. And every time, like, oh, I have this problem, what would you say? He's like, just apply the philosophy. I'm like, what the heck? I mean, that's not what I'm hoping to hear. But at the end of the day, that is just right. I mean, you
Yeah.
cannot be living of what ifs all the time.
Yeah.
So you can only control what you can control, and the rest you'll deal with it when you come across it. I mean, one of the things that I've had to not learn, but get more comfortable with is my role is hairy problem solver. That is what I do best. And so, just how do you say, just incorporate it. And then when you get to a problem, just solve it. So,
Yeah.
and that's been extremely helpful for me.
Yeah. Apply the strategies that work and trust the process, right?
Correct. Yep.
Go with what you know to have worked and been true. Be careful and judicious. Do the right thing, and it tends to work out.
Correct. Yep.
Yeah. Love it.
That's great.
Love it. Well, Tamus, thank you so much for sharing all this. That was a lot of wisdom in a short amount of time.
Yeah, thank
I can
you.
tell you've had a lot of reflection on your crazy path in your career. So thank you so much for being here and sharing all of this with us.
Yeah, of course. My pleasure. Thank you.